class, welcome to today's lecture. It is on contracts. Now, contracts is a very, very important area of the law, regardless of what business you're in. Obviously, the biggest business inside of our current area is the hospitality industry. That encompasses all the restaurants, all the hotels, all the entertainment places. Even, there can be an argument to anything in transportation, rental cars, stuff like that. It all is driven by our tourism here in Central Florida. And contracts are a huge part of the tourism industry. So regardless of what business anyone's in, tourism is going to have an effect on it, and the laws of contracts will be dealt with inside of any business. So we're going to kind of talk about basic contract law, give us some understandings of how a contract is formed, what a contract is, and throughout other lectures we'll get more in depth into different aspects of contracts. So I'm going to start with a definition of a contract. So one of the definitions I'm going to read to you, which I don't read a lot of stuff out of the book, but for contracts sometimes you kind of have to, because contracts require a complete definite. So that means when we talk about contracts, whether we're teaching it or writing it, signing it, whatever it is, it has to be essentially perfect, or you run into problems. That's where all the litigation comes in regards to contracts, is the contracts weren't properly written or executed. So we got to make sure that everything's done correctly when we talk about contracts. Let's start with the definition. Definition of a contract is: a contract is a promise or a set of promises for the breach of which the law gives a remedy, or the performance of which the law in some way recognizes a duty. Okay, let's unpack that. Okay, now I'm not going to expect anyone to actually define that verbatim. What you need to know is a contract is a promise for a promise. So I'm promising to sell you this widget for $8, and you're promising to pay me the $8. It's a promise for a promise. Now, there are some contracts, which we'll talk about later, that are a little bit different, that only require one promise, like a reward. Like if I have a dog and he's lost and I post a sign that says, Fido's lost, $50 reward. Okay, well, you can attempt to find Fido, but if you don't, it's okay. Okay, there's no breach. Okay, where most all contracts, though, do have a breach element. And that's the second thing they were saying. They're saying it's a promise for a promise for which the breach. So the breach means you don't do what you said you're supposed to do. So let's talk about the widget. So I got a widget, it's $8. I say, I will deliver this widget to your house for $8. And you agree, yes, if you deliver the widget to my house for $8, I will pay you for the widget. And I show up to your house with the widget, and you're like, ooh, I only got $5. Now we have a problem. You have breached the contract because you promised to pay $8. And I am damaged because I drove out to your place, wasted my time, my day, potentially the sale of the widget, because I was holding it for you, all kinds of things. So there's a breach. So it's a promise for a promise, in which a breach of which gives a remedy. Okay, which would be money, or specific performance. There's all kinds of things we're going to get into, but that's the basic concept. A contract is a promise for a promise. That's the number one thing you need to know, and that a breach is possible inside of this contract. So let's talk about the elements of a contract. The elements of the contract are an agreement between competent parties based on genuine assent, supported by consideration, made for a lawful objective, and in the form required by law. Okay, so those are the 6 elements of a contract. I'm going to highlight them. I like to highlight things that I put in exams, so that when I'm going back and reading the exams, I can be like, oh yeah, I definitely told them they should know that. So I would know that. 6 elements to a contract. And we're going to go through each and every one of those 6 elements, but I'm going to go through them again real quick. There's an agreement between competent parties based on genuine assent, supported by consideration, made for a lawful objective, and in the form required by law. Okay, so I'm going to go over it really quick what those 6 things mean, and then we're going to unpack them in more complete terms as we go through our lectures. So it's an agreement. That means you agreed, like you said yes. So there was an offer and there was acceptance. There was an agreement, okay? It wasn't I thought you agreed or might have agreed. I'm not sure. No, there was an agreement. That's the first thing for a contract. The second thing, between competent parties. So you can't be a minor, okay? It would be an example. You're not competent until the age of 18. That's what the law says. Or, well, there are exceptions to that, but that's an example. Or, okay, you have dementia. You're 90 years old, you have dementia, you don't understand what's kind of going on in the world today, you're not competent to enter into a contract. 3, based upon genuine assent. So that genuine assent, we're going to get into that. It's an interesting concept, but you have to know of what the contract terms are, and you're genuinely assenting to what it is. So an example would be, you say, I'm going to sell you a widget for $8. And you think I meant the blue widget. Well, I meant the red widget. And we didn't really talk about which widget. We gotta have a meeting of the minds, what they call it, genuine assent. Next part is supported by consideration. Incredibly commonly tested aspect of contract law is consideration. Consideration is what you're giving up, okay? So if I said to you, I am going to give you this widget, okay? And you're like, thank you. We don't have a contract. I don't have to give you the widget. There's no consideration, okay? You didn't do anything. You're not losing anything. There's no remedy at law that you can come after, okay? So there has to be consideration. That's the $8, okay? Normally it's money. Sometimes it's forbearance. We'll talk about it. But like if I said to you, I will give you this widget if you quit smoking cigarettes for 1 month. That would be consideration. I have the widget, is what I'm giving, and you're giving up smoking. So there was consideration on both sides. The next element is made for a lawful objective. Okay, so I say to you, I'm going to sell you these drugs for $10, and I'm going to drive them to your house, and you're going to pay me $10. Well, the consideration is I am going to give you drugs, and I'm going to deliver them. And your consideration is the $10, okay? So that's what I'm giving. I'm giving you drugs and my time driving it to you. You're giving up your money. However, we don't have a contract because it's not lawful to sell drugs, okay? So if something is a crime, you can't contract for a crime. So you can't go to court and be like, Judge, he owes me $10 for the drugs we agreed to buy from him. You can't do that, okay? So it has to be for a lawful objective. Number 6, in the form required by law. We're going to talk about that. In the form required by law, some contracts are required to be in writing. Not all. Doesn't have to. Not everything has to be in writing, but some do, and we'll get into those. But there are, 6 major ones that will need to be in writing. But we'll talk about them in a future lecture. Okay. So that is kind of the basic construction of a contract. You got to have those things. Now, when there's certain definitions you're going to want to know, okay? One of them is obligor and obligee, okay? Or let's back that up. Promisor and promisee. So the promisor is the person who makes the initial promise. I promise to pay, okay? Or I promise to give you the widget, okay? And the promisee is the person receiving that promise. Same thing with obligor and obligee. I'm going to kind of give you the actual definition of them. An obligor is the promisor, and the obligee is the promisee who can claim the benefit of the obligation. Now, for the sakes of our class, we're not going to use those terms, okay? And they won't be tested, but I just want to make sure that you've heard them before in the constructs of contract law. Now, as we move forward, we have to make sure that we understand that there are 2 definitions that you will need to know. And they are offeror and offeree, okay? So, if I say to you, I am going to sell you this widget for $5, okay? And let's use a real world term. You go to the movie theaters. It's entertainment based, okay? Which is very common in our hospitality driven Central Florida. You go to a movie theater, you go to a dinner, you go to a dinner show. Go into one of these dinner shows, and the dinner show says to you as you're walking through the mall, would you like tickets to the dinner show? $25. And you're like, ooh, $25. tickets to the dinner show. So you stop, okay, to talk to him. Now, he is the offeror, the person who said to you, would you like to buy these tickets for $25? Okay? You, the patron, are the offeree. Now, you have the opportunity to accept or decline. You don't have to buy the tickets, but he has made an offer to you, and it's your decision on whether you take it or not. So that's offer and offeree. Highly tested. Just the difference, just knowing who the offeror was and who the offeree is. Now, what's an interesting concept, and we probably won't get into this as far as testing, but just in general, is the offeror and the offeree can change. So, medieval times guy says, I shouldn't use an actual business. So, dinner show guy says, I will sell you these 2 tickets to a dinner show for $25. Okay? He is the offeror. You are the offeree. You have the power to accept. And you say, no, but I will give you $20 for the dinner tickets. Now the offeror and offeree have flipped. You are now the offeror, okay? Because you have changed the terms, okay? And now the dinner show salesman has the opportunity to accept or decline as they are the offeree, okay? So that's kind of how it works. The offeror is the person making an offer. Offeree is the person who has the ability to accept, and they can flip as negotiations go on and back and forth. There are many different types of contracts, but the ones we want to talk about are contracts that are otherwise void or voidable contracts. Okay, and I'm going to read you a definition of them. A voidable contract is an agreement that is otherwise binding and enforceable but may be rejected at the option of one of the parties as a result of specific circumstances. Okay, voidable contract makes sense though. Is if I said to you, I am going to deliver you this. Okay, we'll use we'll go back to the dinner show hypothetical. So you go to the dinner show. The guy says $25 to go to this dinner show. And if you have 24 hours to change your mind, just come back to the station, no questions asked, no reason. The show is on Saturday, it is Tuesday. As long as you're here by Wednesday at this time, I'll give you your money back. So you can scour the internet, you can go on Groupon, you can do whatever, you can do research on it, and if you decide you didn't want it, I will give you your $25 back, okay? And you accept. You have a voidable contract. You have the ability to void the contract as long as you follow the specific terms, which is 24 hours. So that's a voidable contract. Now, some contracts, are what we call valid contracts. Those are ones that are not voidable. So same hypothetical, I'll sell you the dinner tickets, $25, no refunds. That is a valid contract. It's binding and enforceable. So that's kind of where those are at, void versus voidable. As we go through, now a void contract, valid versus voidable, and then there's a third one, void. Okay, a void contract is a contract that would be, for instance, illegal. Okay, that would be an example. That contract's no good. So if we write up on a piece of paper that, you're going to help me cheat on my taxes, okay, well, that contract's void. So valid, voidable, and void are the 3 types of contracts that we kind of need to know for the sense of our class. Now, one type of contract that is very, very, very interesting to talk about is the difference between a bilateral contract and a unilateral contract. Okay, now a bilateral contract requires the performance of 2 people. Okay, minimum of 2. Okay, a unilateral just has 1. So uni is 1, bilateral 2. Now I am going to read a case to you, and I don't do this very often, but inside of the contract lectures we kind of have to read more out of text and more out of case law and different things to get an understanding. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you the definition of bilateral and unilateral, the official definition, and then I'm going to read a case to you. Okay, so a bilateral contract is an agreement under which one promise is given in exchange for another. So I promise to do something for you, you promise to reciprocate that back to me. A unilateral contract is where only one party makes a promise. Those are normally rewards. So if I say to you, find Fido for $10, well, I'm the only person making the promise. You haven't promised me that you're going to do it. Now, you may undertake it and you may attempt to do it, okay? But if you don't succeed, you're not in trouble. You don't owe me anything. It's a unilateral contract. So the case is Risk Services and Combined Insurance Companies are subsidiaries of Aon Corporation. Okay, the parent corporation issued an interdependency memo dated February 20th, which encouraged ARS brokerage offices to place insurance businesses with Aon affiliated companies. It also set up a bonus pool for revenues generated under the plan, with Combined agreeing to pay 30% annual premiums on all life products over 15-year terms plus 15% first year for all other products. John Meadows saw the memo February 20th and believed it would entitle him to compensation over and above his employment contract. Meadows put Combined in touch with Dillard's department stores on March 24, 2000. Dillard's and Combined executed a 5-year agreement whereby Dillard's employees could purchase life, disability, and other insurance policies through workplace enrollment. When Meadows did not receive a bonus pooled money generated by the transaction, he sued his employer for breach of unilateral contract. The employer's defense with the memo was not sufficient to definite and constitute an offer. So, they sent out a memo. Okay, so let's break all this down. That's a lot of mumbo jumbo. I understand reading law cases is something that, until you've done it over and over and over and over again, they're very confusing. But this is what happens is company sends out memo to the employees and says, hey, listen, here's the deal. We got a little bonus thing going on here. If you can get people into a 5-year or more term life insurance, we're going to give you a bonus 30% on that money. And they just send it out to the company, to everybody. All the salesmen. Salesman gets it and goes, all right, I'm going to try and see if I can't sell one of these 5-year or more term life insurance policies. I'll make more money. It's a bonus. It's a unilateral contract. He doesn't have to do it. It's just been offered to him. Okay, kind of like the reward scenario with Fido. Yeah, I asked you to find Fido, and you try. It doesn't mean you have to. Same thing with this. The memo sent out, the company saying, if you can, you're going to get a bonus. Well, what happens is he hits Dillard's department store. I mean, an incredible contract for all their employees. Okay, big contract. And he figures he's going to get paid because of this memo. Well, the company says, well, we're not going to pay you. That wasn't an offer. We were just, shooting it out there, as, hey, go out there and work hard and you'll get paid more and all these kinds of things. Well, the company lost and the employee won. So, Mr. Meadows won $2.4 million in unpaid wages for the unilateral contract. So that salesman, who probably made $50,000 a year, made what he would make in 45 years of employment on that one sale, $2.4 million, because it was a unilateral contract. So what it's saying is, at the end of the day, when you make an offer as an employer, you better be ready to make contingencies on the offer. So the point of the case is to show that when you send a memo out or anything, or you give your employees an incentives, you may want to cap those incentives, or you may want to, the company didn't think anyone was going to get Dillard's. Okay, that wasn't what they were thinking. Their anticipation was for current clients and the call list they got. So as the case went on, employees were given call lists, cold call, and they call people on the phone. This guy just happened to know somebody at Dillard's, and it worked out in his world, and it snowball effect, and boom, he hit big. You have to be able. So when you just put out a memo or you just challenge someone to a reward, you gotta pay it. Okay, on a unilateral contract. So it's very, very important for our management of our restaurants, things like that, hotels, especially timeshare is a big one. Happens all the time in timeshare, which is part of our hospitality industry here and business here in Orlando. Is they'll offer the salesmen certain percentages if they sell more, and a lot of times they do, and then all of a sudden the timeshare sells like, whoa, I didn't think you were going to sell that. We didn't mean that. You have to be very definite when you offer a contract. Okay, very definite. And what the court went on to say in this case with the insurance salesman is that the actual business owner, the person who sends out the memo, who makes the offer, they have to have an extreme amount of definitions. I mean, it has to be exactly what you want. So make sure that if you have any contingencies, you put them in your memo or in your offer to the world, okay? So that's kind of the difference between unilateral and bilateral. As we kind of move on, discussing our initial introduction to contracts, I think it's incredibly important that we kind of review just basically what we went over in the sense that the elements of a contract. That's kind of what the remaining lectures are going to be on. It's going to be on each of these things. So we got to have an agreement. We have to have offer and acceptance, which we will learn about, okay? Once again, people have to be competent. It has to be genuine assent, supported by consideration, made for a lawful objective, and in the form required by law. So that is our basic introduction to contracts. Make sure that we know the elements of a contract. That's incredibly important. Make sure you know the definitions of offeror and offeree. Very important. And additionally, I want you to understand the difference between avoidable, valid, and void contracts, okay? So valid contracts, they're valid. I'll sell you the widget for $5 and you agree, okay? It's valid, it's binding. Avoidable contracts where I say I'll sell you the widget for $5, but you can back out in 24 hours for any reason if you'd like to. That's voidable. And a void agreement is one that is based upon some illegality of some sort. And one last thing I forgot to discuss was this definition right of first refusal. Okay, so what does that mean, right of first refusal? I'm going to give you the actual definition. It's the right of a party to meet the terms of a proposed contract before it is executed, such as real estate purchase agreements. Okay, let's unpack all that. Don't worry about the actual definition. What you need to know is if you have the right of first refusal in a contract, that means that normally the original offeror has the ability to buy back the product. So here's what happens. I say to you, I am going to sell you this widget for $8. I'm going to deliver it to your house. However, if you ever want to sell the widget, you need to give me the first right to buy it back at $5. So that keeps people from changing the price of products and lowering its value by selling it secondhand on the market. So a lot of times you don't want to see your product all over eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, things like that, because you're selling them new for $100, and now you've sold 1,000 of them, and everyone's selling them used for $10 on eBay, and you don't want that. So you put in a first right of refusal. It's an important part of contract law. I just want you guys to make sure you understand what that is, first right of refusal. And other than that, that's going to leave us with this lecture. I want you guys to have a great week, and we will see you next time.